What is Arizona football's chances of getting a game-changing wide receiver in the transfer portal, and what would that mean?
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, the show is brought to you by Gametime. Check it out, Gametime. All kinds of good stuff going on at Gametime. All right, now we are going to talk about Elijhah Badger. Now, Arizona football the last couple of years has had some of the best wide receiving cores in the entire country. That is beyond dispute. You look 2 years ago, where you had Tetaroa McMillan, Jacob Cowing, and Dorian Singer, basically 3,000-yard wide receivers. All were absolutely fantastic. Dorian Singer moved on to USC. This past year, Arizona had Tetaroa McMillan, who really kind of emerged as one of the handful of best wide receivers in the country, and Jacob Cowing, who became a fourth-round pick of the San Francisco 49ers. But you really weren't able to replace that third one. Montana Lamonius Craig was just kind of okay. He played the entire time, but he was just kind of okay. Now, that is something that Jed Fish was very fond of, was just playing three wide receivers, and it really made no sense to me, but that is what it is. It's why we are where we are at. So obviously Jacob Cowing has moved on to the NFL, but now you have a bunch of different guys that are going to be vying for some of these receiver spots. But one thing about Bobby Wade is that Bobby Wade wants to play a bunch of receivers. I think he wants to rotate 5 or 6 guys in, and I am in on that. Now, listen, if you got T-Mac and you got Jacob Cowing and you don't want him to come off the field, I get it. I totally get it. I would not want them to come off the field either. But I tell you that because that doesn't mean, though, that receivers that are just kind of okay can't come off the field. It drove me up a wall last year when Montana Lamonius Craig would not come off the field under any circumstances until basically the end of the season. Made no sense. So Tetaroa McMillan is back. Obviously, he's got the foot injury he's dealing with, but he's expected to be back and fully healthy by the time camp starts. There's really no concerns about him going forward there. And then you've got some other guys that I think are going to be very, very fascinating in all of this. Malachi Riley, I believe, has big-time potential. I believe that Malachi Riley can be one of the best players on this team, and it would not surprise me at all. It really would not if Malachi Riley caught for 700-800 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns. He didn't get to play a ton last year, but when he did play, he was the one that generally got behind the defense. He had more big plays than Montana did, and he played about 5% of the time that Montana did. So that is something to keep in mind. I am a big fan of Malachi Riley. I think that he needs to start no matter what happens. There is that. Now, Montana Lamonius Craig. I shouldn't make it out like he's a bad player. Not a bad player, but he was just kind of out there. I think you could have put a lot of receivers in that same spot that he was in last year, and they could have put the exact same numbers. I did not quite understand that, but this is a second straight coaching staff that really, really likes him. Bobby Wade has talked about him being one of the leaders in the clubhouse, and that means something, especially if you're a wide receiver coach. That is 1,000% something that you'd like to see. And, when you look at Montana, he looks the part. I mean, he's big, he's physical. He was an ex-4-star kid out of Inglewood. Not a lot of dudes at the wide receiver position look like Montana Lamonius Craig. But I still think the issue, though, is that I'm just not sure how good he is. Now, we are going to find that out. I believe we will find out just how good he is this year because there is going to be balls to be caught. But we're going to talk about somebody else in there that could very, very much throw a wrench into things in a good way for the University of Arizona. But those are the guys. I love A.J. Jones as well. I'd like to see him be able to touch the field a little bit more. He's a huge guy. He's fast. He can really play. Romello Murphy, like him a lot. I think that he's going to fill into that role that I was hoping that Kevin Green would be able to get, but that obviously did not work out here at the U of A. Kevin Green is off at Washington. Like Kevin Green a great deal. I do not understand for a second why he went to Washington when Jed Fish did not play him to begin with at Arizona. But be that as it may, that just kind of is what it is. Now, so that's kind of your wide receiver. Jackson Holman had some flashes as well. So again, it's a nice unit. But Elijhah Badger, if you were able to bring in Elijhah Badger, who is the best wide receiver in the entire portal, that would be massive. Now, Badger, I believe, is an NFL player. I believe he's a top 3 round pick. He is incredibly good. He is he didn't have a real quarterback throwing to him this past year, which obviously kind of diminished his capabilities of really realizing where he could be. But he is really good. You watch him, the previous year, 900 yards, almost 7 or 8 touchdowns. And again, that's with shoddy quarterback play. With Noah Fafita, you certainly don't have to worry about there being shoddy quarterback play. As we've always talked about, Noah Fafita is the quarterback that if you get open, you are going to get the ball. As one parent told me about him, he said, "What I love about Noah is if you get open, you're going to eat." And that is where it is with Elijhah Badger. Now, in the next segment, we're going to break down the 3 finalists, but he and T-Mac would be an absolute dynamic duo, and I think it would be impossible to make a case that they are not the best wide receiver duo in the entire country, because in T-Mac, I believe you have the best wide receiver in the nation, and then in Elijhah Badger, I believe you probably have someone that's probably in that top 10 to 12 range who could possibly be even better, being that he's going to have a quarterback that's going to be able to get him the ball. And both of them are big, both of them are physical, and both of them have just a real ability to get open. They're both NFL wide receivers, and I think that's something that you got to really got to keep in mind, is that when you look at NFL players, they generally look a little bit different. Now, T-Mac is on a different level, obviously, than Elijhah Badger, but Elijhah Badger looks different than most of the players out there. And, you put both of them out there, and Noah Fafita is going to have an abundance of riches. And, but one thing you got to remember about Badger as well is that, yes, he is supposed to be fine and everything, dealing with a little bit of a back issue, but I would imagine that he should be fine. He can go, like I said, he can go pretty much wherever he wants. Wherever Elijhah Badger wants to go play, he's going to be able to go there, and that school would take him because, again, you watch him, you look at him on paper, and you're like, man, that is what a dude like that is supposed to look like. So, again, he's got a lot of potential, and I think if you're Arizona, you would love to get him in the fold, and he's got a very, very good relationship with Bobby Wade. We've been talking about this for a while now, that if he were to enter the portal, that Arizona would be right in it because of his relationship with Bobby Wade. Plus, he'd be able to kind of stay, he'd be able to stay in state. There would be a lot of different angles for him to be able to exercise. But Arizona, though, like I said, I think is in a good position right here. Is he going to come here? I can't vouch for that, but I know that Arizona feels it has a real chance. We're going to find this one out on Friday, obviously. But, you look at his schools. I mean, this is a guy that has a lot of, he's got a lot of different options on places that he can go to. And he's that dude. I mean, he is an incredibly talented wide receiver, but I think he would fit in very, very well with Arizona. And I think that there is a reason why he should go to Arizona. But first, if you want to watch all these guys next year, the best thing to do is get on Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, with Gametime, there's all kinds of really good stuff going on there. And I think the best thing about Gametime is that it's not just for sports, it's for concerts, it's for all kinds of stuff. Gametime is your one-stop shop for all of this. And again, A lot of people have used it. I know people that went to the Alamo Bowl last second and they used Gametime. I know people that go to punk metal concerts, or if that's a thing, and they use Gametime because it works and it's easy and it's convenient. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk about Elijhah Badger's 3 finalists. We are going to work backwards. Okay, first, Washington is one of them. Grr. All right, now with Washington, it's an interesting situation because obviously Jedd Fisch is up there in Washington, but Washington doesn't have the on-the-field prowess that Arizona is going to have this coming year. First of all, they have a mess of an offensive line. That is going to be a situation where I think those quarterbacks are going to be running for their lives, and they haven't really been able to replace those. And, as we saw in the Alamo Bowl, if you got an offensive line that is not able to protect, then that is going to be a little bit of an issue for you, and that will, I think that is going to play itself out. Factor in as well that Will Rogers is not very good. Listen, last year, Will Rogers at Mississippi State, we saw him. He was not good at all. A lot of dinking and dunking, and a dude that just was not really able to get the ball to the wide receivers. Now, you could say that, there's going to be playing time to be had there. Sure. But if you're Elijhah Badger, there's going to be playing time to be had anywhere. When you're Denzel Boston and Giles, I can't even remember his name, and some other dudes, yes, there's going to be playing time to be had. You're also going into the Big Ten. And again, you got a quarterback that is not nearly as good as Noah Fifita. No matter what any Washington fan says, they're just being a dweeb if they tell you they'd rather have Will Rogers than Noah Fifita. Noah Fifita, you know what you've got, and Noah Fifita is an absolute stud. Plus, you're going to be playing in rainy, smelly Seattle. Who wants to be having the smell in the rain? And that's not going to be necessarily conducive for you when you got a bad quarterback as well. I would not go there. That makes no sense to me. And that is just, like I said, and plus Jedd Fisch will tell you a bunch of stuff that isn't true, like he has told multiple U of A players about stuff that isn't true. And one is redshirting, and the other one is, I guess we'll find out where he's going to be at in the wide receiver room. I wish them nothing but the best, though, because I do like them and their families a great deal. I just am baffled by that decision. Okay, now with Florida's fascinating because you've got a quarterback coming in from Wisconsin, but then you've also got a top 5, or you've got maybe the best quarterback in the entire country in, DJ Treadway, I believe is his name, but he's also going to be a freshman. And looking at Florida's schedule, that is a gauntlet. I mean, you've got Georgia, you've got Bama, you've got all of them. And not only do you have all of them, you have a lot of them basically in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And on top of that, yes, you could probably get a little bit more NIL there, but you also might be playing for a coach that's going to be on the hot seat, not necessarily because he isn't good, but because he hasn't won there yet. And I don't think in year 3 with that schedule, he is going to win either. I also think it's going to be very difficult for Badger to put up the numbers that he could probably otherwise put up there because you're going to have, again, you got a Wisconsin quarterback, or you got a freshman quarterback who's immensely talented, but it's also going to take him quite a while, I think, to be able to come acclimated. And again, you're going to be playing a murderer's row of teams. It is going to be drastically different than anything ASU has played. So you've got Washington and you've got Florida. From an on-the-field perspective, if you're Elijhah Badger, I don't know that that any of those teams can provide you the comfort of knowing that you have a quarterback that is going to be able to get you the ball. And in an offense with a guy opposite T-Mac, you're not going to be getting double-teamed. You're not going to be, because, again, there's enough talent to go around. And the Big 12, while a good conference, is not going to be like playing Georgia and Alabama and schools like that on a week-in, week-out basis. And, oh, by the way, did I mention you're not going to have to be double-teamed as well? So if this is a decision where you just want to go somewhere and then be able to get into the NFL, I think it makes more sense than anything to be able to commit to the University of Arizona. If you decide to back the A, I think that you're going to feel pretty good about the situation that you put yourself into, mainly because this is you're going to be able to put up numbers. Now, listen, I know a lot of people look at the NIL stuff and they're like, oh, I can make a little bit more here or there. But there's also something to be said for, taking a little bit of a loss to be able to take a little bit of a loss to be able to get that money back. And at Arizona, you're going to be able to do that. And I think that's something that should be very appealing to most players, is that at Arizona, you can do that. You can get much better. And again, you got a place that wants you to be there. The one thing that is really cool about this group of players, amongst many things, is how close they are. Arizona put out the full court press to get him. Now, I think a lot of times there's players that they're like, I really don't want this guy here, or whatever the case may be. And it kind of probably shows on the recruiting visit, whatever the case may be. These guys want him here. And if you're T-Mac, it makes your life easier because, Jacob Cowing, even though he wasn't as good as T-Mac, made T-Mac's life easier because Jacob Cowing was an awesome wide receiver. His acceleration from 1 to 5 yards was absolutely fantastic. And he was just overall a really good player that you had to pay attention to. Arizona, like I said, I believe Arizona's got some really talented wide receivers, but there's nobody that's proven like Badger. I do think Malachi Riley is going to be an absolute stud. But like I said, there's nobody that is proven like Badger. If Badger comes in, he becomes that number 2 wide receiver, and I think you can really kind of pencil him in then, as long as he stays healthy, as probably being a top 3-round pick, because if he's open, Arizona's got a quarterback that is going to be able to get him the ball, and I think that's something that's very, very intriguing about this entire situation is, again, you got a quarterback that can get you the ball. And I don't know that Washington could say that with Will Rogers, and I certainly don't know that Florida can say that with Graham Mertz and Treadway and all of those dudes. So if you're Badger and you're looking for the best spot, I think it's Arizona. Now, again, we're going to know on Friday, but if Arizona were to get Badger, I think you're looking at easily the best wide receiver duo in the country, and a team that, if you can make sure that offensive line is shored up, is going to have legitimate playoff aspirations, because the skill position players are going to be amongst the very best in the country. You've already obviously got a total stud in Noah Fafita. And then with Tetaroa McMillan, Elijhah Badger, Malachi Riley, Montana Lamonius Craig, then you got guys like Rayshawn Speedy Luke, Quali Conley, and I think you're also going to probably see Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. Would not surprise me at all if he merits his way back into the discussion. I have no clue if how he is eligible, but it does appear that he is going to be eligible again. And you also have a running back out of Arkansas that is quite good as well. So Arizona is going to be loaded on the offensive side of the ball. I think defensively, you just need Arizona not to stink. If Arizona can be pretty good, decent, I think Arizona is going to win a lot of games. But again, we will certainly keep you up to date on Elijhah Badger. That is going to be a massive deal for the U of A if they can get him, mainly because he is really, really good and he would fit in perfectly. And I think he would be a perfect replacement. Even though he's totally different, I think he would be a perfect replacement for Jacob Cowing. And you would have, like I said, I think you'd have the best wide receiver duo in the entire country with both of those. And at that point, if you get him, it is game on. So we will obviously keep you up to date on that. Now, we're going to talk a little bit Arizona basketball here to close off the show. But first, FanDuel. All right, the NBA playoffs are going on right now. And you might say, I have no team in the NBA playoffs. No, I do not care. But guess what? If you bet on a team that is in the NBA playoffs, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more interesting, especially, too, if you think that you've got a little bit of a under the radar pick. Maybe you go in there and you're like, all right, that's where I'm going with. But FanDuel is also awesome because you know that your money is good with FanDuel. There's no guesswork. There's none of that. FanDuel is fun. It is for the people, by the people. Check it out, FanDuel.com/locked-on. You know your money is good. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about KJ Lewis. I think people are sleeping on KJ Lewis just like they were sleeping on him last year. Jason Shear's one of them. I believe that KJ Lewis is going to average more than 11 points per game because, first of all, that would just be a natural progression. If KJ Lewis averaged 7 in 20 minutes and if he plays 30, well, guess what? He'd probably be in that 10-11 range. But I believe that he's also going to be better than that. And the reason that I believe that he's going to be better than that is because I actually believe he's going to improve. I think KJ Lewis is going to be in that 14-point realm, and he's somebody that people keep, I think, are sleeping on when they're talking about Joson St-On. Again, St-On keeps talking about how he and Caleb Love are good to go. Cool. Awesome. Seriously, awesome. But KJ Lewis is going to be starting at the other wing. So, and that is always somewhat absent in Joson St-On's remarks is the fact that there is another guy that is probably going to start and play as many minutes as Caleb Love. Now, I am of the opinion that you get all three, and I don't see why St-On can't play 25 minutes a game. I am 1,000% in on that. I just don't know in this day and age that a player like that is going to be cool not playing or coming off the bench. But again, maybe he looks at a big picture. I mean, you look at all those Kentucky teams, they all had a bunch of dudes that didn't start, and guess what? They're in the NBA and they became lottery picks. I always say this too. NBA teams do not care who starts. I think it's more of a pride thing. With St-On, if he's an NBA player, they're going to be able to realize that very, very quickly that he is an NBA player, and I think that will certainly, it's not going to be something where you're going to have to kind of guess, well, could he fit in here? You're going to know really quickly, and he's got the body type. I mean, he's a fantastic player. He can get to the bucket. He can make threes. He can do a lot of different things. He is just very, very good all the way around. But like I said, I don't know that he's going to be okay coming off the bench. With all the tweets people keep bringing up, I would be much more invested in this if he said, I talked with Caleb Love, I talked with KJ Lewis, big things to come. We are good to go, but there is never the KJ Lewis part in that, and it's almost like he's forgetting that KJ Lewis is on the team. So, and again, I would be stunned. I do not believe for a second that KJ Lewis will not start next year, so we will certainly find that one out. But either way, this is going to be, I believe, a good week for Arizona. I do believe you're going to get some good KJ Lewis news and hopefully some good Caleb Love news as well. And like I said, would very much like Joson St-On to come here. I'm just still kind of under the impression that I'll believe it when I see it, but I would love for him to come here. All right, now, Friday going to be a big day for Arizona, obviously, because you've already got the Elijhah Badger news. Hopefully he makes the right decision and he decides to back the A. But you've also got, like I said, it wouldn't surprise me at all, some more Arizona players making their decision. Plus, also, big shout out to Keyshawn Johnson and Pella Larson. Keyshawn Johnson, especially, I mean, he measured in very, very well, and, your 42-inch vertical. He is going to get a spot on an NBA roster. Shout out to Jack Murphy as well for calling that one. I did not see that. Jack Murphy is the man, though, and Keyshawn is going to be able to get an NBA. I think Keyshawn Johnson's going to get an NBA spot. Now, not going to say he's a starter, but I do believe that he is going to be a valuable player that even if he's not a rotation dude, he's going to be the guy that you want coming off the bench or, kind of that 11th, 12th guy, just good vibes all the way around. All right. Now, if Elijhah Badger makes the right decision, we will obviously come back and talk about Elijhah Badger in the following show. And obviously, Arizona, it's going to be a big weekend for Arizona football recruiting. We're going to talk about that a ton. There's a lot of really good names that are in play here for the U of A. And I think that Brent Brennan's going to show some people that he gets what he's talking about here. So we will certainly find that one out. But like I said, going to be a pretty good recruiting weekend for the University of Arizona. But on that note, as always, very much appreciate you guys making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you talking about some Elijhah Badger.